one in front of you because I don't have that. I don't have that. I don't actually have the official agenda on paper right in front of me. I apologize. I'm running
Right,
behind.
yep, I'd be happy to, Mike.
Either that, or somebody can email that to me real quick. The agenda.
Okay, it's coming your way.
We'll get Paula to email it real quick.
Thank you, Paula.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Lorley.
Hello, Debbie. How are you?
Awesome. Are you feeling better?
Yeah, I'm starting to feel a lot better. Thanks.
All right.
I'll be right back. I got a little puppy dog out.
Okay, so I got the agenda. I can read that statement now.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Mateo, do you want to check your sound for us?
Hello.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again for now, and we'll open you up when it's time for comment, okay?
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Please don't let him talk.
Doug will do enough talking for all of us.
And Mr. Ted Wilgus, would you do a sound check for us?
Hey there, how are y'all doing?
Good. Doing good. Thank you.
So, how many are we waiting on now?
2.
3, Bruce Morris, Brian Shepherd, Tim Willis. Unless they let someone know they weren't coming.
Last I knew, they were all planning to attend when I spoke to them last. So
Okay.
I know Bruce was out of town, but he was planning to join from where he was at. I resent him the link.
Remember?
We'll give them a couple minutes and then we'll start. I think we got enough people to have a quorum anyway, but
37th Street Eaton.
Sounds good.
about 2 minutes or so, and then
No, they're fine.
Hey, Dan.
Okay. I think we probably should get underway here. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Blanton, chairman of this committee, and I want to welcome y'all here. If you would bear with me tonight, this is the first time I've ran a meeting online. Hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward. Just got a couple of presentations. There's no action items I don't see on the agenda, so I think we're good with that. There's a couple of formalities we got to get to first before we get going. One thing I want to point out is when we get into some discussion, if you look on your screen, there's a little hand button at the bottom of the list of the attendees. If you want to speak, try to use that, and then I'm gonna try to keep coordinated with those back sitting at the listening station, and in case we need to allow them people to speak. So without further ado, I think I either need to read this statement or we're going to take a roll call first. Laura, if you would help me out, which do I need to do first?
Yep. Let's do the roll call first, and then you can read the statement.
Okay, so whoever's in charge of doing that, would you please take care of that?
Okay. Mike, this is Ann. I'll call out the names, all right? And if I call your name, just say whether you're here or not. So Lauren Birch.
I'm here.
Thank you. Doug Cross.
I'm here.
Mary Sue Hammond.
Here.
Thank you. Jim Harden.
Here.
All right. Mike Marshall. I know he's there.
Sorry, we were muted.
Here.
That's okay. I know he's there. Bruce Morris. Right. Okay. Brian Shepherd. Still not there. Adam Tyler, we know wasn't coming. Ted Wilgus.
Here.
Thanks. Tim Willis. Nope. Anna Shellham.
Hi. Here,
Thank you.
present.
And Mike Blanton. Yes. All right, so that's a quorum. Eight members are present right now. Thank you, and they may join later. So now, Mike, you can do your reading.
I think you lost him.
So, he might have stepped away.
No, I think he may have connection issues.
Laura, why don't you go ahead and read that statement if you got it?
Yep, I'll do that. And Paula, if you would just text Mike and see if he responds.
Will do.
Thank you. Okay. So I will read the ethics statement. So North Carolina General Statute 138A-15E mandates at the beginning of any meeting of a board that the chair shall remind all members of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest under Chapter 138. The chair also shall inquire as to whether there is any known conflict of interest with respect to any matters coming before the board at that time. So North Carolina General Statute 143B 289.54 G2 states a member of the Marine Fisheries Commission shall not vote on any issue before the commission that would have a significant and predictable effect on the member's financial interests. For purposes of the subdivision, significant and predictable effects means there is or may be a close causal link between the decision of the commission and an expected disproportionate financial benefit to the member that is shared only by a minority of persons within the same industry, sector, or gear group. A member of the commission shall also abstain from voting on any petition submitted by an advocacy group of which the member is an officer or sits as a member of the advocacy group's board of directors. A member of the commission shall not use the member's official position as a member of the commission to secure any special privilege or exemption of substantial value for any person, and no member of the commission shall, by the member's conduct, create an appearance that any person could improperly influence the member in the performance of the member's official duties.
As vice chair, I'd like to ask if there's any conflict. No conflict seems to be there. Do I get a second? Doug Cross gives his second.
So Mike, do you want to?
Yeah. So
Are you
I'm
back?
just trying to figure out where we're at, listening for a
So,
second, and then
I just read the conflict of interest statement and there's no conflict.
all right. So we should be going to. I'm sorry, I'm flabbergasted a little bit by all this going on.
So next would be approval of the agenda.
Yeah. So a motion to approve the agenda.
Doug Cross, I make a motion, we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
And if you could, when you speak out and say your name for the record.
Jim Harden, second.
Thank you. All right. So any discussion on that? Or if not, we'll take a roll call vote.
All right, we'll do the same, just holler out. Lauren Birch, you approve?
I approve.
Okay. Doug Cross,
Aye.
Easiest thing on do to click a link.
Mary Sue Hammond,
Approve.
Jim Harden,
Aye.
Be able to send you the email again.
Mike Marshall. Thank you. Bruce Morris. Oh, he's not here. Brian Shepherd's not here. Adam's not here. Ted Wilgus.
Yes.
Thank you. And Shellum
Aye.
and Mike Blanton.
Ah,
All right.
okay. So flipping back and forth here.
Minutes.
Yeah. Okay. My file's corrupted for some reason. Something's going on with my stuff tonight. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from the what month? November or October?
October.
October 2022 meeting.
Motion to approve.
All right, motion by Anna Shellum.
Yes, sir.
Doug Cross, I second.
Second by Doug Cross. All right, so we'll take the roll call vote.
Okay.
If there's no changes, anybody have any changes? Anybody? Okay, so we'll take a vote.
All right. Lauren Birch. Doug Cross.
Approve.
Mary Sue Hammond.
Approve.
Jim Harden.
Approve.
Mike Marshall. Oh, yeah.
He says yes with his hands.
Okay. I wasn't looking over that screen. Ted Wilgus
Approve.
and Anna Shellum
Approved.
and Mike Blanton. Great. Minutes are
Okay.
approved.
Thank you, Ann, for that. So now I get to kind of be quiet for a little while, hopefully. And I think it's Laura, or we were going to have a presentation or change to the schedule of who's presenting what. If I understood that.
So for the item on your agenda for the blue crab, there's no change, but I did want to let you know that Joe Facendala is going to be introducing the blue crab item. So when that comes up on the agenda, you'll just ask Joe to introduce our presenter tonight, who's Brett Wilson.
Okay. All right. All right. So now it's on you, Laura, right?
Yep, it's
All
all
right.
mine.
Please take the floor.
You can sit back and relax.
Thank you. Been a busy day. I'm sorry.
All right. So I am going to open up my file. And then I will get started. And I'm going to be presenting a very short orientation presentation that's focused mainly on the duties of the advisory committee. And Anna, if you can give me a thumbs up when you see it. Awesome. Thank you. It's on my end too, Mike.
Yeah, it's raining here. The weather's a little messy, and I just don't think the connections are great.
Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead with it. All right, so thank you, Mike. And as he said, my name's Laura Klebansky, and I am the Marine Fishery Commission liaison. So first, I want to say welcome to our new advisors and also those of you who are coming back for another term. Since tonight's meeting is only 2 hours, and that sounds like a lot, but actually it's not. And we do have other business to get to. This will be pretty brief, a pretty brief orientation. And so that'll we're going to focus mostly on the duties of the advisory committees. So my goal tonight is just to begin what I hope will be sort of an ongoing learning experience for all of us. But to get started, we're going to do an overview of your duties and sort of look at what that looks like over the year in the context of our annual meeting cycle. So while this is going to be pretty quick, please know that myself and my staff in the Marine Fishery Commission office are available to you anytime to answer questions. So please feel free to reach out to us. All right, so let's get started. So I do want to briefly touch on the fact that North Carolina is celebrating its 200th anniversary of fisheries management this year. So as you can imagine, a lot has changed in 200 years. And for our purposes today, I want to mention two dates specifically in history. And the first date is December of 1822. And at that time, the first fisheries legislation was passed here in North Carolina, and that was titled An Act to Prevent the Destruction of Oysters and Other Purposes. So just to drop that in history for you, in 1822, James Monroe was the 5th president of the United States, and the number of states had just increased to 24, with Missouri being admitted the year before. So this first legislation, which happened a long time ago, set gear restrictions. It established an oyster season. It created fines to deter non-resident oyster harvests, and it also prohibited the transport of oysters out of the state. So even way back in 1822, there were concerns about overharvest, specifically by out-of-state fishermen. So from this really early beginning, fisheries management in the state evolved from a focus on this single fishery and broadened out to many more species, and also to include regulation of the evolving commercial and recreational sectors. So this leads to the second point in time, which is 1997. And this was the year that the Fisheries Reform Act was passed and ushered in a new way of managing fisheries in the state. So on the screen, you can see a quote here from the preamble of the Fisheries Reform Act, which says, "The General Assembly recognizes the need to protect our coastal fisheries resources and to balance the commercial and recreational interests through better management of these resources." So the Fisheries Reform Act was a remarkable cooperative effort by legislators, fisheries managers, scientists, and both commercial and recreational stakeholders. And it made many changes to the way the state managed the fishery. The way it did this was by restructuring the Marine Fisheries Commission. It mandated the development of fishery management and coastal habitat protection plans, and it also implemented a new licensing structure. So we're not going to talk about the full FRA. That's too broad of a topic for our short time period tonight. But instead, I want to bring your attention to a single FRA, which is the Fisheries Reform Act statute, which is here on the screen. It's NCAC 143B-289.57. So this is the law that establishes the advisory committees. And I have not included the text of this law because it's pretty long, but as you can see from the title, the law includes the establishment, the membership, and the selection of the advisory committees. And tonight I'm going to focus on that final noun in this list, which is the duties that this law describes. So I've pulled the duty language from the body of the law, and those are displayed here on the screen. So the first duty of the advisory committees is to assist the commission in the performance of its duties by reviewing all matters referred to the committee by the commission and shall make findings and recommendations on these matters. The second is that the standing committees may make findings and recommendations as to any matter related to its subject area, and the commission shall consider all findings and recommendations. So now that we've read the actual language of the law, let's talk about what this looks like in action. So as I mentioned earlier, both the FRA mandated two types of management plan, the fisheries management plans and the coastal habitat protection plan. So both of these are described in the statute, but differ in their development and also their adoption. So the CHIP is a collaborative process with two other commissions that are within the Department of Environmental Quality, while the fishery management plans are solely under the authority of the Marine Fisheries Commission. And the majority of the actions undertaken by the Marine Fisheries Commission are associated with the processes that underlie these management plans. So what that means is that most of the action items that come before you, the advisory committees, are also from these same processes. So on the screen here, I know this might be hard to read, but what is displayed is basically a simplified representation of the FMP process. So again, I'm focusing on the FMP process because, as I said earlier, it's the most frequent path by which the MFC refers matters to you. So here I've highlighted in orange, again, the point at which the fishery management plan process, at which the commission approves a draft FMP document to come out to you, the advisory committees, for review. And it also goes out to the public at the same time. So this is the point in the formal process where you fulfill that first duty that we discussed. And while this represents the primary way by which you assist the commission in their duties, there are other opportunities for you to provide informal feedback to division staff and the commission as these plans are being developed, as well as opportunities for you to refer matters to the commission that may be related to the subject area that your committee focuses on. And those together represent and are covered under, again, that second duty, which is listed here, that the commission shall, so that the standing committees may make findings and recommendations as to any matter related to its subject area, and that the commission shall consider all those findings and recommendations. So, for example, at these quarterly meetings, you'll receive updates from myself and staff on various issues, and this is to keep you up to speed on commission business, and it provides you an opportunity to ask questions and also to provide feedback. So an example of this is tonight's informal opportunity for you to discuss and provide comment on the DMF lead biologists on the striped mullet supplement. So again, there's no specific referral from the commission in these cases. Rather, it's an opportunity for you, the advisors, to provide thoughts or feedbacks to the staff and the commission. All right, so seeing this one little bar in this process may not seem like a lot. However, we currently have 13 fishery management plans, which are reviewed approximately every 5 years. And with the additional updates and discussions, the advisory committee calendar can fill up quite quickly. So to help coordinate all of these moving pieces, we've developed a MFC work plan, which you can see here on the screen. I recognize that this is impossible to read, but I'm including it here just so you know that it exists and that it's available to you as you work through these advisory committees. So it's updated, the work plan is updated after each commission meeting, and it's part of the chairman's briefing materials for each meeting. So we use this as a tracking tool for monitoring the various work topics that the commission and the division are working on over approximately a 2-year period. So this can be really helpful if you're wondering, say, when is the clam and oyster FMP going to be coming to the advisory committees? This document is where you can find that information. So I do recommend that you review this document at least once a year, so you have a sense of what might be coming for your review in the near future. And it also just in terms of planning ahead for preparation. So for example, you can listen in to specific discussions at the Marine Fishery Commission meetings. You can plan to speak to staff or review specific documents if you have time to review this and you know what's going to be coming up in the near future. So this is one tool that's available on the Division of Marine Fisheries website. However, there are many, many more, and this includes all of the MFC briefing materials, recordings of all of our meetings, DMF review documents, including the annual FMP reviews and the big book, which is just the gigantic statistics report that the division puts out every year. And I don't want to overwhelm you at this point, but I do want you to know that you have a plethora of resources available to you. And that gets me to the Marine Fishery Commission office. So here on the screen are the MFC support staff. 3 of us are housed within the Division of Marine Fisheries, and the MFC attorney is housed in the Department of Justice. So the in-house staff are myself, Paula Farnell, who's our new program assistant, and also Catherine Bloom, who is our rulemaking coordinator. And we are available to you, as I said earlier, anytime if you have questions or concerns about any of your activities that are related to your AC meetings. So Paula and I are actually your primary points of contact and act sort of like your guides at the division. So we are a good place to start, and we can generally get you where you need to go. So speaking of Paula, I'm just going to hand it over to her for a minute so she can introduce herself. I think most of you have had an opportunity to either speak with or email with her as you've been onboarding.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everybody. Thanks, guys, for bearing with me as I'm new to this myself and learning things, but I'm excited to get to work with all of you. And like Laura said, please just reach out. Many of you have, and so thank you for that. And if I don't know the answer, I will work to make sure that I find it and point you in the right direction. So I look forward to working with everybody.
Thanks, Paula. All right. So like I said, there's a lot to cover and not a lot of time. One of the items that we included in your meeting materials for this meeting was a presentation titled Stock Assessment 101. Hopefully you all had a chance to watch it. We do have Laura Lee with us tonight, who is the division's lead stock assessment scientist. So if you would like, Mike, and we have the opportunity, if anyone has any questions for her, or also if anyone has any questions for me about the Marine Fishery Commission advisory committees.
Laura, anything,
Yes.
anything. Let's hear. I see your hand up. Let's hear from you.
This is not a question, Laura. I just wanted to really thank you for preparing that for us. It's very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sue.
Anyone else? Okay. I think we're moving on. Laura's still got the floor. I believe she's gonna have some guys talk about strike mullet.
Yes. So I'm going to do I'm just going to take down this presentation, and then I have some updates. So since your October meeting, the commission did meet in February, and I'm going to give you those updates. I do want to first touch on an item. I apologize, but I don't remember who brought the question up, but they asked for an update on the CCA lawsuit. And I did talk to so the department attorney is the person who I contact about that lawsuit. And I did have a very quick statement. It's going to be completely unsatisfactory, but it is what I have at the moment. So I thought I would start with that. So the state decided not to appeal the Court of Appeals decision, and the case is continuing in the Superior Court. And the state's answer to the complaint is due on January 17th, which was today. And at this time, that's basically the only update that I can provide. I did not prepare background, and that's something if you know, I don't really know how much background I can provide at this time, but that is basically an update on the CCA lawsuit. And were there any questions for that item? Okay, I'll keep going. All right, so the MFC November meeting. So I have a number of updates from the November commission meeting. At the October meeting, we were still awaiting a final commissioner, but I'm happy to say we now have a full complement of commissioners. Sarah Gardner was our last one, and she was sworn in at the October AC meetings, actually, during the last cycle. So we did have a full complement at the November meeting. So the commission discussed the joint fishing water delineation issue at their November meeting, and this is a continuation of an issue that began way back in 2018, and it's related to the joint rules that are shared by the Marine Fisheries Commission and the Wildlife Resources Commission, and the boundaries that establish the inland joint and coastal waters of the state. So a memorandum of agreement was prepared over the summer by MFC and WRC staff at the request of the commission, or the chairman of both commissions, and in an effort to make, this was in an effort to make progress on this issue, which, like I said, has been ongoing. So the MFC did not act on the MOA. However, they did request that DMF staff reach out to WRC staff and continue to work towards working on a plan or recommendations of how to move forward with the issue. So the commission also approved the full slate of nominees for the obligatory seats. The obligatory seat, it's just one, for the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council. So those nominees will now go to the governor's boards and commissions office for consideration. And those 4 nominees were Mike Blanton, Jess Hawkins, Thomas Newman, and Robert Rule. The commission also gave final approval on Amendment 2 of the Estuarine Striped Bass FMP. This included maintaining the gillnet closure in the Tar and in the Neuse and Tarpam river systems until 2024, at which time the division will evaluate the effectiveness of the harvest moratorium and the gillnet closures. So from the October meeting, we had a little bit of discussion about how the striped bass issue really was, a lot of the discussion around Amendment 2 was dominated by this gillnet issue in the river systems. But in addition to those, there are quite a few other management measures that are going into place, and the division is in the process of implementing those. So the Commission also gave final approval on the goals and objectives for development of Amendment 2 of the striped mullet FMP. The Commission also, in addition to that, so the division is working on Amendment 2. But in the meantime, we are also, we've developed a supplement, and the Commission gave approval for option 2 for that supplement A to Amendment 1 of the striped mullet FMP. And the supplement is now out for public comment. Just as a reminder, the option 2 was a November 7th through December 31st closure. So that's an end of the year closure, which is estimated to result in a 22.1% reduction. So if you'll remember back in October, we had the striped mullet leads come to speak to you about Amendment 2 for the scoping period. We do have them with us tonight. If anyone would like to, if anyone has questions, concerns, comments that they'd like to provide on the supplement that's out for public comment now. So I'll just pause. And Mike, we have Dan Zapp and Jeff Dobbs, and they have been working in tandem on these. So I'm not sure who's going to be our lead for tonight, but hopefully one of them will speak up and save me.
Sure, either or. Is there a presentation or no?
No, there's not a presentation. It's just, we're just looking for, comment on that supplement that's out now.
Sure. So if anybody has any questions, comments, want to discuss anything about striped mullet, now's the time. So I see Miss Sue Hammond's hand is still up, and it's been up for a while, but I just want to make sure she didn't have anything.
Sorry, I don't know how to take it down.
It's okay. Just hit the same button. It's a little confusing.
Did it go off now?
No, ma'am. Hit it one more time. There you go.
Sorry.
No problem. So any discussion on the striped mullet at all?
And I know this committee is shellfish and crustacean, so I don't know if that's going to be anything, but
Sure.
Anything that anyone would like to ask or comment on is welcome.
Right. I'm not seeing anybody chomping at the bit, so I think we'll just kind of move on. See what we got next.
Blue crab.
Yep.
Crab.
So
Yep,
we
that's
have
what
the
we're
blue
gonna talk about.
crab.
I want to hear about this diamondback stuff.
Mike, I have just a little bit of wrap up for the update.
Sure. Go ahead, Laura.
I do want to just let everyone know about the February meeting. So the next Marine Fishery Commission meeting is scheduled for February 22nd through the 24th, and that's going to be held in New Bern. And the topics that are on the agenda for that are false albacore information paper. There's going to be a spotted sea trout fishery overview. Tonight, you're going to hear about the blue crab FMP Amendment 3 revision. So we'll be talking about that at the February meeting following this one. And also the commission will be hearing an overview of the public comment that was received on the striped mullet supplement. And they will then be voting on final approval of that supplement. And that concludes my update. Thank you, Mike.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Sorry to get ahead of you there. So next we'll hear from Joe Fasendola, which I think is going to turn it over to someone else. But Joe, if you're ready, whenever you are, I am.
I am ready. Need to share my screen. Of course, it's not letting me. Okay, now I can.
Your way, Joe.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. I was worried. Okay. So tonight, we're gonna ask you for some input and discussion, if you have any, on approving a new gear modification for use to reduce bycatch of diamondback terrapins in the diamondback terrapin management areas. And I know some of you were involved in the last FMP in the process of developing diamondback terrapin management areas, but a lot of you are new. So before I turn over to Brett to give the overview of his research on this gear modification, I'm just going to give you a real quick overview of kind of the history and what the heck diamondback terrapin management areas are and how we got there. And if you have any questions, about this part, you can ask at the end, but I'm just going to kind of go through these couple slides pretty quick. So the issue of diamondback terrapin bycatch in crab pots has been an issue that's been discussed since the very first blue crab FMP in the 90s. And each FMP took additional steps to work their way to where we are now in the protection of diamondback terrapins using the diamondback terrapin management area approach. So because of the life history of diamondback terrapins, they're long-lived, slow to mature, and they have a low reproductive output, they're vulnerable to depletions in areas when they're caught in crab pots or other impacts from humans. So in 2013, in FMP, the Blue Crab FMP Amendment 2, the Marine Fisheries Commission did recognize diamondback terrapins as a wildlife species in need of protection from crab pots. And this was based on a large body of work that had happened since that initial Amendment 1 or the initial Blue Crab FMP. And it kind of showed that across the range of diamondback terrapins, crab pots are a serious threat to their population, as well as other things such as coastal development of kind of building on their nesting sites or roads that block their nesting sites from the water where the terrapins have to cross. But an independent group of scientists and managers did determine that crab pots were probably the primary threat and cause of reduction of blue crab or diamondback terrapin numbers in North Carolina. And since the Marine Fisheries Commission has jurisdiction over the blue crab pot fishery, in Amendment 2, the recommended management strategy was to pass the rule that in 2014 was adopted that granted the division director proclamation authority to require terrapin excluder devices in each funnel of crab pots and to specify areas, time periods, and the means and methods. And this would apply to this could apply to commercial and recreational blue crab pots. And as part of that adopted management strategy in Amendment 2, the Marine Fisheries Commission first required the division to come up with criteria and a kind of a framework of when you would use excluded devices in crab pots. And this framework would need to be approved by the Marine Fisheries Commission prior to the director using that proclamation authority to require excluder devices. So the division then developed a framework for the proclamation use criteria for terrapin excluder specifications and consulted with the advisory committees, and it was approved by the Marine Fisheries Commission. This process was rolled into the Blue Crab FMP Amendment 3, where the Marine Fisheries Commission approved that framework, and that framework essentially would create diamondback terrapin management areas, or DTMAs. And this approach was kind of a highly targeted approach that was designed to minimize impact of the blue crab fishery and maximize diamondback terrapin protection in those specific diamondback terrapin management areas. And the considerations for creating those targeted diamondback terrapin management areas were terrapins show seasonal activity, so they're not active year-round. Terrapins are also only vulnerable to capture in crab pots below a certain or above a certain depth, so less than kind of 10 feet, they're vulnerable to capture in crab pots. Pots deeper than that typically don't catch terrapins, as well as the distance from shore. Pots that are set beyond a specific distance from shore typically don't catch crab pots or catch terrapins either. So there's this kind of zone of vulnerability that's depth and distance where terrapins are vulnerable to crab pot capture. The area would need to have terrapins present. We also focused on looking at existing conservation areas such as estuarine research reserves, national seashores, wildlife refuges, places like that to kind of enhance the management goals of those areas of protecting these wildlife species, as well as kind of their existing boundaries on a map where people know. And the process also involves stakeholder input. So after adopting that framework, the May 2020 revision to the Blue Crab FMP actually established the first two diamondback management areas in the state. And they're located, you can see on the map here, the red box is the Masonboro Island diamondback terrapin management area, and the green kind of area is the Bald Head Island diamondback terrapin management area. And these areas were effective March 2021. And both these areas had documented populations of diamondback terrapins. There was a lot of work done on researching terrapins in both these areas. And they both are, especially the Masonboro area, there's no development on the island. So any of those other potential impacts, such as building on nesting sites or roads, not impacting the terrapin populations. So crab pots are the primary human caused threat in these areas. And so the division in that framework and adopted by the Marine Fisheries Commission, there was kind of three options of bycatch reduction devices that were approved in that framework. One is kind of this South Carolina design, which is kind of viewed, it's been a lot of research gone into it, viewed as kind of the gold standard of having the best reduction of terrapin catch while still allowing crab catch. Next is this pre-made square plastic excluder device that was made by a manufacturer and was available at the time when this framework was adopted, but is no longer available through that manufacturer, and as well as making the same dimensions but using 10 gauge wire. We also allowed that an excluder device would not be required if the funnel of the crab pot was made small enough to meet those dimensions of these two excluder devices and made rigid to maintain those dimensions. And we'll talk about that later because that language was a little gray. And so in order to kind of be able to have some flexibility in approving new excluder devices, in the framework we built in that if a new device was developed by researchers, we could consult with a work group of commercial partners and managers, or if a new device kind of was proposed by the industry, we could use that work group to kind of evaluate a new device and then bring it forward for approval for use in diamondback terrapin management areas. But the requirements would be that any new device would have to reduce cost to the commercial crabbers as far as the device or gear modification goes, or reduce impact to blue crab catch compared to the existing approved devices. And it would need to offer the same or better protection to diamondback terrapins as the approved excluder devices already. And we would do that in consultation with the Shellfish and Crustacean Advisory Committee. And so that's the step where we're at now. And I'm going to pass this off to Brett Wilson, who's a PhD student at UNCW, who did a lot of the work, did all of the work on looking at this gear modification that we're proposing to adopt.
Thanks, Joe. I'm gonna try and share my screen. Give me 1 second. All right, so hopefully everyone can see this. As Joe mentioned, Yeah, my name is Brett Wilson. I'm a graduate student in Dr. Amanda Southwood Williards lab at UNCW. We've been working on this project for the past couple years. So the title of the project, we're testing the efficacy of these industry proposed gear modifications on terrapin bycatch in the crab fishery. So I'm just going to jump right into it. As Joe mentioned before, the creation of DTMAs was a step, a step taken by management. But with that said, DMF still did acknowledge the need for other alternatives to be other alternatives and gear modifications to be tested. We understand that a lot of these crabbers are pretty resistant to these BRDs. So we understand that these BRDs have shown pretty mixed results in field testing all across the East Coast and Gulf Coast. So there are concerns for perceived reductions in crab catch rates and sizes using these BRDs. So we actually had two local crabbers, Phil Smith and Sam Romano. So Phil, he crabs down in Bald Head Island, and San Romano is in Masonboro Island. So as Joe mentioned before, those are two of the current DTMAs. So they actually propose gear modifications that effectively shrink the funnel entrance without the need for installing a BRD. So our primary objective of this project was to simply evaluate the effectiveness of these crabber proposed gear modifications in preventing terrapin bycatch, as well as look at any impacts of these modifications on crab catch. So we did have a two-step approach to this. So fisheries independent field trials and fisheries dependent field trials, which I'll go over. But I first want to jump into the designs themselves. So these were the three designs that we've tested. So we use a standard crab pot as our control, and the way we measure the funnel entrance size is the number of hexagon meshes at each funnel entrance. So our standard crab pot, as I mentioned, which served as our control, it has 12 hexagon meshes at the funnel entrance. A reinforced design, which was proposed. This is actually the same exact size as the standard. So 12 hexagon funnel meshes at the entrance. However, I know it's really tough to see in this picture, but there's actually 10 gauge wire on the top and bottom of this funnel entrance. And it's fitted to shrink to the same exact dimensions as one of the currently approved BRDs that are approved for use in DTMAs, which is the 4x16 centimeter insert. The third funnel that we tested was a narrow funnel design. So this one's actually a bit smaller. It's actually 9 hexagon meshes at the funnel entrance. And before I get into the results, one thing that I think we're really trying to stress with this is we think that since these are designs that were created by crabbers with crabbers' interests, in mind with these, that if these were found to have be successful, these would gain a lot more attraction from crabbers in the industry compared to the BRDs, simply because they had the crabbers' interest in mind through the developing stages. So moving on to how we tested these. So I want to begin with the fisheries independent field trials. So we had 3 sites down here in southeastern North Carolina. Masonboro Island, which, as Joe mentioned, is one of the DTMAs. Radar Bay, which is actually a site in the lower Cape Fear River. And then Oak Island, which this site was actually a completely protected Coast Guard channel. So we did some preliminary surveying and just confirmed that there's overlap of terrapins and blue crabs at these sites, and there was plenty of terrapins and blue crabs at these sites. So they were selected for testing at these areas. So fisheries independent field trials. At these 3 sites, we deployed triplicate sets of each crab pot type. So this photo in the lower left is an example of one triplicate set. So as you can see, there are 3 crab pots. So this is one set, and it consisted of a standard, a reinforced, and a narrow funnel design. As you can see, we actually put chimneys on these crab pots just so that any captured terrapins had access to air. And then we would process these and check them every 24 hours and rebate them, and then collect any data on catch size and or catch rates and size distributions of both terrapins and blue crabs between each pot type. So there were 5 to 10 sets of deployed at each site. And like I mentioned, they were fished for 24 hours over the past 2 springs and summers. So I'm going to move into those results. So over those 2 summers, we caught almost 200 terrapins in these triplicate sets. So large majority of them were captured in standard crab pots, 109, as compared to 28. Only 28 terrapins were captured in the narrow funnels, and then somewhere in the middle was the reinforced with 56. So we, when we ran the numbers, we found this was a 74% reduction in terrapin bycatch in the narrow funnel pots, and then almost a 50% reduction in terrapin bycatch in the reinforced funnel pots compared to standard crab pots. So we ran some statistical models, and the result of that is we found that there was a statistically significant difference in bycatch per unit effort, which is the metric that we used to measure or analyze terrapin bycatch. So we found that there is significantly lower terrapins captured in reinforced and narrow funnel pots compared to standard crab pots. This figure in the bottom right is just another way to visualize that. As you can see, we caught majority of our terrapins in standard crab pots. One thing worth noting, terrapins are sexually dimorphic. The females get much larger. So we actually noticed that since the females get much larger than adult males. So we actually found that the narrow funnels do not just a great job of excluding terrapins, but females in particular. As you can see, reinforced and standard, we get more of an even mix of males and females. So the overall, takeaway from this slide is that the narrow funnel designs were extremely effective at reducing terrapin bycatch. But we understand that's only half the battle that we're looking at. We also want to minimize crab catch or minimize impacts to crab catch. So we looked at catch per unit effort of legal blue crabs as well as the size of blue crabs. So the carapace width tip to tip of legal blue crabs. So we ran similar models for both catch per unit effort and carapace width, and we actually found that there was no significant difference among pot types for either carapace width or catch per unit effort. This figure in the top right just shows the catch per unit effort by pot type. So this was actually calculated as per pot per hour. So as you can see, standard actually had a slightly higher CPUE than reinforced and narrow, but as discussed before, when we ran the statistical analyses, we found that this was not a significant difference among any crab pot type. And similarly, as you can see in this figure in the bottom right, which shows the carapace width of legal blue crabs from each pot type, we once again find no significant difference among any pot type. It's actually worth noting these black dots on this figure represent statistical outliers. And it's actually worth noting that our largest crabs, as you can see, were actually captured in the narrow funnel crab pots. So while we conducted these fisheries independent field trials, we also wanted to test these in a commercial setting. So those same 2 crabbers, Sam Romano and Phil Smith, agreed to incorporate these designs into their routine fishing operations. So they deployed these pots along with their regular standard crab pots as well. And we conducted fisheries observer trips to collect data, similar data on a per pot basis of both crab catch and terrapin bycatch. So once again, we were interested in looking at bycatch per unit effort of terrapins and then catch per unit effort of legal blue crabs. And we're actually working on a total landing value, calculating a total landing value of those legal blue crabs, so we can actually look at it from a dollar standpoint. So moving on to the results of the fisheries dependent field trials. So that we conducted 16 fisheries dependent observer trips over the course of the past 2 summers. And we caught 24 terrapins throughout those trips. 23 of them were captured in standard crab pots. 1 of them were captured in the reinforced funnel design, and then none were captured in the narrow funnels. So moving on to the crab catch, if there was any impacts to crab catch, once again, just like our fisheries independent field trials, we once again see that there are no significant differences among pot types impact to crab catch per unit effort. So actually, in this case, we actually find that the narrow funnel designs perform slightly higher than both the reinforced and standard designs for catch per unit effort of legal blue crabs. So this was calculated per 24-hour soak, which was the typical soak time for commercial crabbing. So overall, once again, we find similar results in the fisheries independent and fisheries dependent field trials in the fact that the narrow funnels do a really great job of excluding terrapins, and we're finding no differences in crab catch rates or sizes among the pot types. So we think this is really promising, these results. One thing that I think is really worth pointing out is we understand that I'll skip to the next slide. We understand that a lot of these crabbers are fishing, a large number of crab pots, and that they can't simply just go out and buy new narrow funnel design pots, right away if they were to get approved. So we've actually done some additional testing to look at ways to alter existing standard crab pots to fit the same dimensions as the narrow funnel ones in a kind of a cheaper and less expensive way. Not just in terms of money, so these crabbers with the narrow funnel designs, they not only do they have to not buy these BRDs, but this also saves them a lot of time since they don't have to install each BRD. And if they're fishing over 100 crab pots, and they have to install 4 BRDs to each crab pot, that can take a significant amount of time. So I want to just go back to this. So we've actually been testing ways to shrink the standard funnel entrance of an existing crab pot to fit the same dimensions as narrow. So what we propose actually is using hog rings. So as I mentioned, the standard funnel has 12 hexagon meshes at the entrance. If we use hog rings on each end, we can shrink the funnel entrance by 2 meshes on each side, which effectively brings it down to 8. But in person, this actually looks very similar to the narrow funnel design. So we tested these in a similar way, in the exact same way that we tested the narrow funnel designs with the independent field trials. We did test these for a few weeks towards the end of the summer this past year. And we found, once again, similar results in the fact that 12 terrapins were captured. All of them were captured in standard pots. None were captured in the reinforced or the modified narrow funnel designs. And similarly, we're finding that our preliminary statistical analyses are showing that there's no difference in carapace width or catch per unit effort of legal blue crabs among these pot types, including the merit and modified narrow funnel designs. So in terms of future work, we would like to continue testing these modified narrow funnel designs. And we would also like to expand this testing throughout other regions in North Carolina. Our work so far has been limited to southeastern North Carolina, where the DTMAs are, but we actually have, had some interest from states such as Virginia and New Jersey that were interested in these designs as well. And then we have a separate project going on with genetics to look at population structure of terrapins. So we're really interested in looking at dispersal and site fidelity, see how much these terrapins are moving. So this has management implications in the fact that if these terrapins are not moving a lot and there's very little gene flow, then a single crab pot mortality event could essentially wipe out local populations of terrapins. So just to provide an update on that project, our preliminary results are suggesting that terrapin populations such as Oak Island and Red Arm Bay, which are in the lower Cape Fear River, do appear to be genetically distinct from those captured among the sites such as Mason Bar Island and Figure 8 Island. So with that said, I'd be happy to take any questions as well. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Any questions for Brett? Miss Sue Ham.
Thanks, Brett. I enjoyed hearing your presentation. See, I don't know how to show my camera. Oh, well. Okay. I did have a couple of questions for you. And you may have answered this, or it might be in the text of what was sent to us. You did at least your first study in a terrapin-rich environment, as I understand it. You chose a place where you knew there were going to be terrapins. And so you found an impact of the device. Suppose you had gone to a terrapin scarce area. Would it have been worth the effort to change the device and restrict the commercial crabbing in that area in a terrapin scarce environment?
So it's a great question. In terms of crab catch, I think truly yes. I think it is worth it. Not only are we not seeing any reductions in crab catch rates or sizes, but anecdotally, I know Sam Romano, who actually came up with the narrow funnel design, he has even proposed, that he thinks that crab retention rates are higher in the narrow funnel design since the funnel entrance is smaller. He seems to think that the crabs that get in are not able to get out as easily. So I think, the fact that there are no really downsides that we're finding in terms of crab catch, I think that it will be worth it. At the very least, crabbers might actually find an increase in their crab catch. But with that said, I understand that not all crabbers would want to do that. So I would say that, that the Diamondback terrapin management areas are specifically designed as terrapin rich areas that also face a lot of crabbing. So, the use of these in non-terrapin areas wouldn't necessarily hurt, but I understand that, these aren't DTMAs, so we weren't necessarily targeting those areas as well.
Okay, yeah. Well, that brings me to my third question. I'll come back to the second. How do you intend to ensure compliance? Can you threaten people? Do you withhold their licenses? Do you arrest them? How will you help commercial crabbers actually comply?
So this upcoming summer, we have some plans. We're actually going to form some workshops with crabbers throughout all of North Carolina. Show them similar presentations just to show them that these are really effective at excluding terrapins, and we're finding no reductions in your crab catch. So it's kind of like an overall benefit to them. But in terms of actual enforcement, one thing that we have discussed is that since we have kind of narrow the definition of the size entrance using the number of hexagon meshes, this is much easier for, for example, Marine Patrol to see, all they have to do is simply pull up a crab pot, count the number of hexagon meshes, and then they can determine whether, that crabber is in compliance or not. In terms of actual enforcement, in terms of how, withholding licenses, that's out of my realm. But, I think that this proposed design is a very, very enforceable method as compared to now. I know they've discussed, trying to like figure out, dimensions using a block and see if the block can get through and things like that. Whereas this is much more simpler. You just count a number of hexagon meshes at the funnel entrance.
Well, and congratulations on coming up with that hog ring idea, because almost everybody has that equipment, and that is a good solution. Then let me ask you the final. I didn't quite understand the sex difference thing, but if I understand it, the females are larger and they're less likely to be caught, or more likely. The question is, will this have an impact on the peeler crab industry? The restrictions are during the height of the peeler crab season, I believe, when people are very interested in isolating those females. And is there any impact there? And I know absolutely almost nothing about peeler crabs. I've given you the extent of what I know. So if it's a dumb question, just move on.
No, it's not my own question at all. No, this is a very good question. I have not actually looked too much into the peeler. I'm also, not wouldn't say I'm deep into peeler crabs as well. However, what we're finding is I haven't seen much of a difference at all between sexes between crabs. However, when I was talking about sex differences, I was mainly referring to the terrapins.
Okay.
The female terrapins are much larger than males, and we're actually finding that areas such as Mason Borough and Bald Head Island, which have historically been heavily fished, we're actually finding that our sex ratios are way off. We're catching very, very few males, if any at all, at these sites, and mainly females, which could possibly suggest that, over the past however many decades, that the male terrapins have essentially been wiped out already by crab potting at these sites.
You don't test the crabs for sex.
We do. I've not done any actual analysis, especially in terms of peeler crabs, but I think preliminarily we have not seen any differences between male and female crab captures, but also that could definitely be due to sites such as Bald Head Island. That's just part of the blue crab life history, where we're catching a lot more females at Bald Head Island and Mason Borough simply due to their life history, rather than the more fresh waters such as Radar Bay in the Cape Fear River, where we're catching more males.
Okay, well, it looks like nice research. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you for the questions.
All right, next we're going to have Ms. Birch. Floor is yours.
Hi. Sorry if you guys have already been through this at another meeting. Just a few questions. How many data points do you actually have when you're looking at your statistics?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I exactly understand what you mean by data points.
From what I understand, you have 5 to 10 sets of crab pots from 3 different sites.
Correct.
Okay, so in one site, just pick one site, how many actual data points do you have for that?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So each site was tested for, we started in April and end in October of the past 2 years. And then, we had 5 to 10 sites, and each data point is per 24-hour soak. So we check these every 24 hours. So we refer to that as our data points. So
how many? Sorry.
I'd say overall for data points in terms of the entire project, we have the upper hundreds, probably close to lower thousands at this point. We've been checking these pots every 24 hours.
But is that per site, or is that all 3 sites?
That is total. Oh,
you know what I mean? Because if you only have 300 data points per site, then statistics can get skewed.
I see what you're saying. Yes. So we did ensure that we have a very equal distribution of site. I don't have an exact number at the top of my head. I would probably put it around 400 per site. Maybe a little bit lower on the Mason Borough end, but yes, I put in the low to mid hundreds per site.
Okay. And this, I don't know if this body does anything like that, but has anyone thought of a grant maybe per pot? Because it's not only the hog rings. The hog rings are cheap. It's that hand that's squeezing the hog ring that gets real tired. You have to pay that worker. You have to move each pot to do this. Is there anything that could maybe offset that?
So one thing that I think we're going to plan to, as I mentioned, we're going to be conducting these workshops in the summer throughout the state, and so not only
What time though?
I'm sorry.
What time? I mean, are you going to have this, the week before 4th of July, or are you going to try to plan this where it's a lax season?
I think just in terms of logistics, it will probably end up being closer to the summer, so which will be in season, which I understand. But with that said, we did get a grant. We did receive a grant, and we actually put in money with that grant to buy these narrow funnel designs for these crabbers. So all I have to do is deploy them. So we're actually providing them with these pots. Additionally, I know other states such as Maryland actually have programs where they form workshops, and they will either install a BRD for the crabber if they bring their pots. So, I know.
But think about that. 1,600 pots on a trailer to go to a workshop.
No,
it takes, you know what I mean? That's not really reasonable.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think actually, Joe might touch on this a little bit later in terms of timing with things. But, I think the ideal plan is to more phase these designs into use rather than just all at once just force them to have to use these. So it's more of, let's say, the they have next off season to actually they can start to phase them in this season, and then perhaps if they this off season is when they can convert or use more or convert using hog rings, or simply just buy new pots as well, because from what I understand, with these crabbers, they do, these pot turnover is fairly high. They seem to be buying new pots every year.
Yeah. Well, they buy new pots, but then they take some out, and then they buy new, and then they take some. I come from a very big crabbing background, so but I also understand. I understand both sides, but I just want to make sure, like, when we're thinking about an actual potential solution, that it's like asking the guys to bring the crab pots to a workshop is not. It's just not going to happen. And most of the cost isn't going to be that funnel, but it's going to be actually the labor to put them on as it goes. I was just wondering how that kind of works.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. We do understand that, we can't, I think that, especially the goal of these workshops is, essentially to show them how to do these with the hog rings. And we understand that, at a certain point, if these were to get approved within the DTMA, they have the option to either convert them using the hog rings on their own time or simply buy new pots. So, and I do understand that, we can't expect them to bring all these but that is a very, very valid point.
But another thing, and I may misunderstand this, but right now we're calling any area that will use this excluder will be 10 feet from shore, or 10 feet deep and 820 feet from shore. Are we excluding areas that don't have the interaction zones as
So,
well?
Ms. Birch, I think Joe might be able to answer some of your questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I can.
Sorry if I jumped ahead.
No worries. You had a lot of good questions. So right now, that interaction zone is what we use to, when we're looking at an area that's potentially, has those terrapins present, has been identified. That's one of the criteria we use to identify an area to designate as a diamondback terrapin management area. So right now, there's only 2 areas designated as diamondback terrapin management areas. And when we drew the maps up, we really looked at areas trying to minimize any of those places that are too deep or too far from shore to require that would make terrapins vulnerable when we draw that box. But I mean, inevitably some things end up in there, but that depth and distance criteria is kind of why we know that a pot in Pamlico Sound someplace isn't like far from shore and deeper water isn't going to impact terrapins. So it wasn't a reason why not to kind of go for requiring these excluder devices or gear modifications across the fishery, and just having that targeted, just draw a box within this area. That's when those excluder devices or gear modifications would be required only during that specific time of year when terrapins are actually active. And that is also for enforcement, because ideally you'd kind of all pots less than 10 feet or closer would use the devices, but that's unenforceable unless we have a box around it. So that's kind of the management area is the box where the devices are required.
Okay. All right. So, because the season would, when you say the season would be March to August, right?
Yeah,
but that's pretty much the whole crabbing season anyway.
Yeah, it overlaps pretty good. And as far as the phase in, if these narrow funnels are approved for use in terrapin management areas, we were allowing them immediately. But if we're removing one of those other options, we give it a year to kind of phase out, so that there's still the gear they have now is compliant, and they have a year if they'd like to change or need to change. There's a year phase in, and that's something we could use input from you guys on too. I'm just kind of thinking about what a realistic pot turnover rate is, and is a year, kind of, we were thinking
about 5.
Okay, so we were just thinking,
but depending on salinity, of course.
that since the narrow funnel design is something that you can potentially have it made, your pots made with those smaller funnels, it wouldn't potentially incur any additional cost. And as you replace your pots, you just swap them out for those narrow funnel designs if you're fishing in a terrapin management area. And also, I guess, to kind of defend Brett's work as far as the sample size, as far as terrapin research goes on terrapin bycatch, he's got one of the largest sample sizes out there as far as terrapin catch. So it's kind of where North Carolina is kind of becoming the gold standard for terrapin bycatch research slowly. So sample size he's got under his belt, no problem. And as far as I think there was a question about focusing on areas with terrapins versus without, that fishery independent portion of the study really was looking at focusing. We wanted to maximize the likelihood of catching terrapins to get that sample size. So it may not be realistic for where a crabber would be setting pots, but we're looking at, kind of what that pot in the worst possible place if you're a terrapin, what kind of reduction you get from using that narrow funnel. And then the fishery dependent side where we're observing the crabber trips, that's kind of the real world application, how those devices are impacting the commercial catch. So it's kind of that was the justification, kind of the thought process behind that two-pronged approach.
Okay, Ms. Birch, does that all your questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, Mr. Will just next, and we'll have Doug Cross, and then Alma Shelley.
Thanks very much. Just had two questions. One, in the paper that was sent, or sort of discussion that was sent to us to review or to look at for more information, there's discussion about the funnels staying essentially rigid and the same size. That was important. So I just wondered in your research and others out there, if you've seen this, do you know if the funnels ever stretch throughout the season or they need to be checked so often? And then the other question was about the water temperature. Given all the fluctuations with the water temperature now, is setting the dates of March 1st to October, are we very confident that we won't get a warm up in February and they start showing up in February or staying longer? Just if there's any way to build in some flexibility there. But thank you.
Sure, those are two great questions. In terms of the first one, so I would say that we found minimal, but we definitely found evidence of I guess technically warping, which is of the funnels. And I think that's the key thing with this project though is we try to keep it as realistic as possible. So we didn't alter them at all or anything. We kind of wanted to make this as natural as it would be, especially for the commercial testing. So I think it's natural to assume that there will be some sort of stretching or warping or anything like that over time. And those results that we have include that. So, and that's why I think the good thing about this, I guess in this, that's what I think is good about this in terms of enforcement is simply you don't have to worry about dimensions changing over time or anything like that. All you have to do is simply count the number of meshes at the entrance. In terms of water temperature, we have not done much sampling outside of that. We usually start sampling just preliminary hotspot scouting around early March, and we have seen some terrapins. I can speak anecdotally. We have an occasional warm up where we might see a few terrapins active outside of that season. So, if we have, a time later in the fall, such as November, where it still seems to be warm, they can still be active. But and on the other side, yeah, like you mentioned, they can certainly be active if we get prolonged warm up, especially. I think if it's a 1 day thing, it's not much of a problem. If we see more of a prolonged, week by week warm up in like January or February, then it could be more of a problem. But I think right now, I think the March to October is fair with their active season.
Thanks so much.
I'll jump in there too. The active season we chose in that framework when Amendment 3 that was passed, that was based on telemetry work from Terrapins at Mason Bro. And their active season up from that work was actually smaller. And then we added a little buffer on it just for that reason, where we seem to be, spring's a little warmer sooner and fall's a little warmer longer, just to give a little buffer on that. So how long that buffer will hold, I don't know, but that was built in with that time frame when it was in the frame.
All right, Doug, what you got for us?
Well, I'm just going to comment to a couple of things and maybe clear up a couple of questions that have been answered. He asked also the most recent question about the temperature and whatnot and the need for maybe an expanded season. I think you're going to find that these narrow funnel pots are so successful that these guys are not going to switch back. Once they switch, they're going to stay with it. In fact, I've talked to Sam, who I can't only but praise for his work on this, along with other crab potter involved and the everybody involved with the University of Wilmington, everything, that this has been a remarkable study. It was first funded and is still funded by the Commercial Resources Grant Division. And, it's been a very successful thing. And it was basically brought up and funded initially because we were blacklisted by Monterey Bay and a couple of other people that we weren't doing enough on our crab plan to stay off the red light on the list. Well, we've gone beyond our effort on what these other states are doing. I mean, this is the first really successful terrapin reduction study that I've seen, even amongst the ones that are still so-called yellow or green lighted, that being Maryland and Alabama, which is a joke. Somehow they're staying yellow and green lighted and able to sell crab meat to some of these higher end retailers, while our crabbers are not. So this is why this study was initially set forth. I think it's been a fantastic study. I think you're going to find that the gear that comes out of this, mainly this narrow funnel, is so efficient that these guys are going to switch over. And once they switch over, they're not going back. I think they'll continue to use this, period. I don't think you'll see any other gear substituted down there. I think that the enforcement of this is going to be fairly easy. You count the number of meshes. If you don't have your pots in line, if they deem it's going to be a intentional act of some kind, then they may write you an initial ticket. They may write you a warning and give you time to get them in place. But I mean, if we give the potters in that area a year to switch over, I think all of them will switch over, because I think they're actually going to catch bigger marketable crabs. So I think that it will be a win-win all the way around. I think that we as a committee should make a motion to support and go with the narrow funnel on the crab pots for these areas. I mean, that's just, I'm talking to crabbers up and down the area, and we're looking at what they believe they can continue to work, and they believe they'll be successful at working with this. And the main thing that I'm running into being on the commission and we're pushing this dialogue to get this basically finished and detailed out and get it to the right people at Monterey Bay and everywhere else to end this discrimination against North Carolina, against the potters and the crabbers, because it's senseless. But we're running into some stone walls, even on our end, and I think that we should discuss about, and maybe put into the form of a motion to carry before the commission, and therefore carry to the state the success of this, and get the commission and the state to write some form of letter or document, and basically getting it in the place of Monterey Bay and these other entities out there, and get it in their hands and say, look, it's just like the lobstermen just did in Maine. They were forced with the same thing from Monterey Bay, and they went to their legislators and everybody else. I think it begins with us going to the commission, pushing it to the commission, getting the commission to push it through to the state, and get the state to push it forward. And I think whether or not that relies in the hands of the division or not, I think it does. So, I mean, we're getting a lot of stonewalling on who is supposed to push it forward. And my response to that is everybody should push it forward because it's beneficial for all the crab potters and for the industry as a whole. So I'm hoping when we talk about this a little more to dialogue in this meeting, that we can formulate a motion that will basically get this thing finally started, getting it pushed to the other end, because right now we're cavitating. We're doing a lot of good things, but we're cavitating. We're not moving. So I think that we should discuss that and see if we can't get it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. All right, Anna.
I just wanted to bring up the suggestion that stone crab has a huge importance at Masonboro Island. I harvest there constantly, and in the last 6 years of my commercial license, I have seen a huge predominance of stone crabs at Masonboro Island, so much so that there is a full sanctuary there now. And I have built my own traps. I've caught them by hand. I know that they like a smaller funnel, those stone crabs. So maybe we're looking at the wrong species. I know that stone crabs get into blue crab traps no matter what, but Masonboro is truly a sanctuary for stone crabs. You've got that jetty right there, and they are abundant. Like I can't get away from them. And I see turpins there too in the marsh, happy and enjoying themselves. But I just want to take into consideration that maybe stone crabs could be a part of the issue, especially because they like narrow entrances and like nesting spots, and they're not afraid to eat each other. They'll eat anything. So it might be great to maybe expand the study areas to places that are not so hot and heavy for stone crab families. That literally 4 years ago in one day, I got 70 stone crab claws by hand at low tide, which that's crazy for me in my small operation. And I know crabbers get them in their pots all the time, but they could have a huge influence on these beautiful turpins. And it's just, and I don't know, Mike, you know a lot more than I do with crabbing, but it's just what I've seen in that area. And we should, I would suggest just expanding the study area. Yeah, because I don't, if I go up north, I don't see them as predominantly. If I go far south, I don't see them as predominantly, but that area is really thick with them. That's all.
That was a consideration when we were developing the Diamondback terrapin management areas. The question of what kind of impact would these devices have to stone crab catch? And that we haven't looked at that. And I think when the next phase of their project, they might look at bycatch species a little more, just kind of all species, whether it be finfish or shellfish. But we did present the blue crab or the stone crab catch information in the Diamondback terrapin management areas, and I'm looking at it now. It wasn't a lot, so it didn't. I mean, it's a lot, I'm assuming, for the people who are doing the landings, but it's less than 0.5% of the overall landings from crab pots were stone crabs. So it was kind of something that was brought up, but we didn't think that the landings at the time were, it wasn't a major component in those areas. But it is something we do need to, it would be good to look at the impacts to other catch like whelks or stone crab or any other catch in pots, what the narrow funnel may impact. And the narrow funnels may not impact stone crab catch at all. That was kind of a concern when we were looking at using the 4 centimeter high ones that are kind of really, thin, so a blue crab can fit through, but a stone crab likely wouldn't. So
Gotcha.
it's something to think about.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions, comments? If not, I want to circle back. I got a question myself to the rigidity of the narrow funnel design is probably my biggest concern You know, the tunnel design, any mesh, regardless if it's 6, 8, 10, 12 meshes, can be manipulated quite easily in a crab pot. And so what my biggest concern would be is that the rigidity of the entranceway being maintained at a certain place over time as the crab pots wear, as the wire begins to weaken, that wire will can be manipulated even more easily. And so my biggest concern, I would say, is that being able to maintain that certain size, even in that narrow funnel design. And so, would it be feasible to address this with the 10 gauge wire being included with the narrow funnel design? Would that impact anything by making it a requirement to have that for rigidity?
So when Brett was looking at the modified or the reinforced funnels that did use that 10 gauge wire, it really didn't seem to I don't know if that wire provided enough rigidity to make a difference, because that was the next piece of this is we're looking to remove that requirement, that 10 gauge wire or that 4 centimeter device, or that language that says you don't need an excluder device if the funnel's made rigid, because made rigid is such a gray, like, unless we define it by, may not, like, has to be that dimension, or like define some sort of PSI pressure that can modify it. Like what's rigid? Steel's rigid, but with enough pressure, it's not. So that was a concern for Marine Patrol, just that rigid language of what we have now is hard for them to enforce. And also, I think adding that wire kind of defeats the plug and play where you just have your pot made and have, no additional work done with the narrow funnel. It kind of, by adding the wire, diminishes that appeal because there's that extra step.
I get that.
But yeah, I guess
it's been something that's been on my mind since the start of all of this, is the maintaining the integrity of the entranceway that the narrow funnel design provides.
That is, if a pot is fished long enough and it gets that corroded, that could be a problem, because we did not look at that beyond 2 seasons of sampling with the gear they use now. So in those 2 seasons, it didn't get that floppy, but that's just our sampling.
Right. Well, I can attest to the fact that in the salinity level of the waterway that you're using is high enough to degrade that pot in a pretty reasonable amount of time. And I say within, it's years of time, but it's not going to last forever. And I don't know the rate at which they're replacing pots at the moment down there. But it is a concern, and it's, I do feel like it's a valid concern, and maybe, by the time it gets to the commission for approval, this could be, sort of cleared up in a way. Doug, you got one more question there?
No, I got a response to your question. The easiest way to solve that is to put a percentage on it, not to exceed. If you exceed a certain percentage over that opening, you're in non-compliance. That's the easiest way to handle that.
And so I get that, and that's what I was just getting ready to get at, is that it would be very interesting to figure out what that narrow funnel design, where it's most effective at the size, and require that crabber to at least maintain that size, and not, when Marine Patrol were to pull that pot, they would be able to just take something, measure that percent, and give them a percentage, like you said. But I want to help these turtles. I've been wanting to help these turtles since the beginning of this amendment, and we've done a lot to do that. The commission that approved the Amendment 3 to the Blue Crab Plan did an outstanding job of vetting the DTMAs, and the Commercial Fishing Resource Fund has fully helped out and been overwhelmingly willing to give the money for these studies, and I praise those who were involved. Sam did a great job of pushing this issue. They should actually be nicknamed the Sam Romano tunnels and the pots, because he maintained his ground, and he made sure to secure the research and the funding that he needed to be able to maintain the fishery as it was down there. We know that the state of North Carolina has diverse and large estuary area, so we know that these DTMAs could possibly start to expand. And getting out in front of this issue by doing this research is one of the most positive things I've ever seen come out of fisheries management and cooperative research and collaborative research. And so I could go on and on and on about this, but I've been a big supporter of this since the beginning. And I'm glad to see that it's made its way to where it's at. And I'm glad that there's continuing to be additional funding. I do predict that when RFPs go back out, that we'll continue to try to support this in whatever ways that we can try to do so, to give more clarity to the crabbers and to be able to impact the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the seafood watch list and this and that and the other in a positive way. And so I just want the committee members to know that are new or that hadn't worked on this project, that it's came a long ways in a pretty short amount of time, and it's been a very positive thing for the crabbers of North Carolina. And I just want to thank the researchers while they're here. I see a couple of names on the screen that I know were involved, and I just want to pat you on the back for the great work. Any other questions about this?
Are we looking to take the options as a recommendation forward to the commission? Is that what we're looking for now?
Yeah, I don't see it as any action items, but we'll entertain any motion that would support or not support.
So Mike, this is Laura.
Sure.
I was just going to say, for this item, you don't have to put forward a motion. If you, as an AC, would like to, then that's it's totally your prerogative. You're basically consulting on this, so you don't need to, you don't have to, but if you would like to, that certainly is generally a stronger statement if you support the actions.
Right.
Put up a slide, kind of what DMF is looking to do with these devices. If it'll help you guys, just have something to look at if you want.
Please.
Okay, let me share my screen.
So Laura, will this issue come back to us at the committee here, or is this basically?
So this is the part of the adaptive management that's already included in amendment. Oh, somebody help me. Amendment 3. And so this actually, because it's just a revision, it doesn't come back to the commission for a vote, but it does come to the Shellfish Crustacean Committee for consultation. So if anybody has any concerns about approving this new type of excluder configuration, this was the point. But basically what we're looking to do is to include you know, that excluder device or configuration in this case that Sam and worked on, and that the research team that just presented has now shown to be effective.
Sure. So the commission,
Doesn't vote.
the division is going to determine based on criteria whether this meets criteria or not. The commission doesn't need formal approval, right?
No, the commission does not need to approve this. They approved the process by which this is adopted. And part of that process was this consultation.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, so I was just going to say one more thing to your point, Doug, of a motion. So since the commission is not going to take this issue up, a supporting motion would be fine, just to be in the record that this committee did support formalizing this narrow tunnel design as an approved device. But it's not absolutely necessary for the commission, you know, to see.
I understand. But I
anyway,
think,
go ahead.
I think we should put forth, I mean, we're the Crustacean Advisory Committee. I think we should put forth a statement of some kind, and I would seek a motion or just however you want to word it, that we support this that we're looking at now on the screen in consultation, because this is exactly the route that we're headed down, and I think the division has it right, and I think we should support what we're looking at now on the screen.
Do you have a motion? Are you offering a motion?
Well, I'm just interested, if there is a motion, I'm down for it, just to bring it to the forefront of our conversations in the next MFC meeting, so we can get a move on with it, because I support it as well.
Well, I'll make that motion that we support the division's recommendation in consultation with the advisory committee as we're viewing it now. I'm not going to say all that, but I'll make that statement.
So what's your motion?
Motion to support the narrow funnels.
Okay.
Second, from Anna Shellham.
For use in DTMAs.
Can I just confirm, would you like to support all of the
yes,
all of the items? Because it's narrow funnel
Yes.
to be included, but it's also to remove that made rigid language because of its
yes,
squishiness.
yes.
That's a technical term.
Squishiness.
So
Oh my
the
goodness.
motion by Doug Cross.
Seconded by Anna Shellham.
And Doug, I'm going to ask for discussion, but I just want to make one quick comment toward your motion. And I don't mean to soak up any amount of time, and I'm going to ask for more, but the made rigid language is okay. But what a good concern here is that tunnel is made to or maintained at a certain size, and that I feel like that's a very important thing here.
Oh, I understand what you're saying, and I agree, and I think division will make that clear in their language, and I think they're going to have to put in a percentage that goes with it. That, I mean, it's just a small percentage, but okay, you've got X number of pots that this is your percentage. Okay, you need to take them out of service or fix the funnels on it. But I think
you can fix them on the fly. You can also open them up on the fly, and that's my concern. Is that if there's no standard here, that we're not going to maintain a standard, then what do we do all the research for?
I agree.
If it can be manipulated so easily.
Well, you got to have the standard to where you can't have it open. I mean, any more open it is going to be allowed, and I mean, if you do, you're going to get a ticket.
So would you consider amending your own motion in some way to sort of address,
I'll consider you amending it, because you must know what you're talking about, and I don't.
So, let's see.
And I'm not trying to get into weeds here. I just don't want to endorse something that I don't fully endorse, and I want to endorse this motion. And I'm going to be quiet for a minute here and just ask if there are any more comments or discussion on this motion, whether for or against.
Lauren Birch has her hand up. I don't know.
Okay, Ms. Burks, go ahead.
Hey, I just want to make sure I understand exactly what's being put to the forefront. So we're saying that at the funnel opening, we have about, what is it, the 9 hexagon meshes with a circumference of 11. So going from 11 to 9 at that funnel opening, correct? And we're talking about that can be done through a hog ring, but it doesn't have to have the hog rings and the excluder, right? It just has to have that narrow opening that's rigid to a certain percentage, give or take, correct?
Within the DTMA, sure.
Yeah, okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure, you know what I mean? Thank you.
There is, so just for clarity, Ms. Birch, and there are several layers to getting to having to have this funnel design put in place. So you know, and that's all outlined in the framework of the DTMA, and it has to actually be designated a DTMA. And then this would, you know, formally be required within those boundary lines. So this is not a statewide requirement at the moment.
Well, I'm just looking at Currituck Sound, and we don't have that many terrapins. There's no terrapin interactions, but it's still, our whole sound is between 820 feet from the shoreline and 10 feet deep. That's our whole sound. But if there isn't any actions, I saw one point in here where it said and has to overlap. Is that the wording that we're approving now, or is it just all of the area of the map?
No, it's just for the language with that is currently outlined in the DTMA requirements and framework. So if the area that you're in becomes a DTMA, then you would fall under these requirements.
Okay, all right, but not the potential interaction zone.
But it you know that to understand more fully.
Sorry. I did read it. I promise, a whole lot.
Yeah.
So, Ms. Birch, if I can, so this is adding new DTMAs would be a separate action. This is only tonight. We're only talking about including this additional type of excluder configuration, and also to remove these, what you see here on the screen. It's only a very small change within that amendment that's already established. So it's only for use in areas that are currently diamondback terrapin management areas.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just trying to clear it up. And thank you, Laura, for that.
Yes, and Ms. Birch is actually a new advisory member, so this is good.
Yeah, this is great.
We got to get everybody caught up.
Conversation. Yeah.
Really, I'm trying to keep up. Dropping more.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
absolutely.
it's great to hear your interaction as a brand new member, you know, and we're glad to have you here for sure. So back to the motion. There's a motion on the floor. And I was sort of speaking to the point of a standard size that we should maintain that tunnel at. And the researchers may not or may know that roundabout dimension that tunnel provides. But I would encourage that with it, even if the motion doesn't become this detailed, that a concern for the division be that there be a standard maintained that narrow tunnel design before just sort of approving this non-mesh, you know, throw your tunnel in there and just let it go however you want it to type of approach. And so that was my genuine concern. All right, so hearing no further discussion, we have a motion on the table.
It's not clear to me what the motion is. Could we restate the actual motion? Thank you.
Sure.
I can read it.
Or if you
So
would.
Doug Cross moved to support the approval of the narrow funnels for use in DTMAs and to remove the option to use a 4x16 centimeter plastic or 10 gauge wire in the made rigid language. So it's just these two items that are on the screen here in the form of a motion. And that was seconded by Anna Shellham.
And what are we doing about Mike's concern?
So that is up to the committee if you would like to adjust the motion or have further discussion.
Mike, can you say an amendment in a succinct way?
Yes, ma'am. You are allowed to amend the current motion or offer a formal amendment, however you would like.
So, Sue, did you want to include something that would address Mike's concern?
Well, it seems like maybe it should be voted on separately. I mean, it seems like a pretty legitimate concern, and that should be added. But I don't know how to say it in a in a votable way.
Right. So, Mike, is your concern you want to ensure that you want to ask the division to consider ensuring that the narrow funnel remains basically the expected shape that it.
Right. So there has to be a standard shape that comes about as you install that tunnel and call it satisfactory within the research that's been done. There has to be some sort of standard dimensions that come about. It's just general geography. Yeah, geometry, excuse me. And so how all that comes about and what shape it takes, there has to be some sort of standard. And the crabber needs to be held to that standard. And without that standard, we really don't have anything. Because that tunnel can be manipulated in many, many different ways. And so my concern would be is that there be a standard size opening for the narrow tunnel and it be held to that standard.
So, Mike, do you mind if I ask Brett, who did the research? Oh, I can wait. I see that.
Go ahead, Doug.
There's a simple way to solve this. And I'd like to speak to Brett. You on there?
Yes.
All right. Would you say that all the small mesh tunnels are pretty consistent in size when you get them patterned out?
Yes.
All you gotta do is all we have to do is issue a pattern that fits that shape that the enforcement officers would be using, and give those to the same crab potters in the DTMAs that it's got to adhere to that. That's all you got to do is cut it, whether it be on a cutting board or whatever.
Right.
You include
I
that
agree with
pattern.
that.
This is a standard, and you've got whatever percentage, strayability from it, if that's even a word. But I mean, that's the simple way to handle that. When this is approved going forward, they're gonna have a pattern cut. And when the guys are fixing their pots, it's got to adhere to that pattern. When they get the pot checked, it adheres to that pattern. Solved.
I fully support that, and that's what I'm looking for is a solution to a problem that I can foresee.
Well, you just got it.
And so, however we can incorporate that into our motion, I would love for that to happen before we adjourn this meeting.
Put it back up there, the original screen.
is Ann. Would a maximum height or I think you called it depth and a maximum width get it? In addition to the chain, the hexagons plus that?
I think that, so I'm gonna, and Brett can talk about this, or Joe, or anybody else who knows more than I do, but I think one of the issues is in terms of enforcement, the shape of the funnel will change, like Mike said. And they saw the change. And Brett, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you said that you did see change in the shape, but that actually that didn't impact the effectiveness of the, or at least you didn't detect any change in the effectiveness of the excluder configuration. But in order to enforce it, it's not realistic for law enforcement to be able to measure them, because they won't be, there's no good way to measure what is essentially a flexible shape. I think that's the issue. And Joe or Brett, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the issue.
Yeah, that, so I have a funnel right here, right? And so you can squeeze it and make, you know, a circle, an oval, a triangle, whatever you want out of it. As long as it's only has an opening of 9 meshes, that area is not going to change. So
Yeah,
if
take
somebody,
that. Now, just a second. Now, take that and stretch it as hard as you can.
well,
Show
yeah,
everybody. There you go. Look how much more open
yeah, so
you can get it.
So that is the it can be blown open that way.
And you did that in about 5 seconds. I'm just
So, yeah,
telling you. It's an issue that needs to be addressed before we turn these tunnels loose, because it can be manipulated very, very easily. And you just proved my point.
Yeah.
That's what I'm telling. That's what I'm saying. And
So I'm going back to my statement a while ago. You know what these tunnels, you know what the pre-approved size basically is. You cut out a rigid pattern that the crab potter and the enforcement agents have the same exact pattern, and it's got to be close to that with a small percentage leeway, you know, or because that way when they go to pull these pots and check them, they see one stretched out, they can set it right in and push it back down. Right. I mean, they can modify on the fly. That's not difficult.
No.
And that way,
I don't have any issues. I don't have any issues with them modifying on the fly as long as they're modifying in the right direction.
Right, but I mean, if they leave the pot and the enforcement goes behind them, and it's not in place like it's supposed to, you know, that's up to enforcement then.
Do you have an amendment to your motion that you would like?
I was trying to get her to put it back up on the screen so I could look at it.
So if I could get Paula, if you could give me the share square, I actually have the motion with what I think is what I've heard needs to be included, but I want you to see it. And Doug and Sue and Mike, please look at it, and I'll share that with you.
You should have it.
Thank you. Can you see that?
That looks good to me.
So it just said also recommend the division consider developing a pattern to ensure compliance and enforcement.
Laura, can you zoom in, please?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
That's a good start. Hopefully, you know, through this meeting and through the meeting minutes and the discussion we've had tonight, that the division will consider, you know, further what this tunnel needs to actually be maintained at, and that's what I was looking for. Doug, are you okay with this friendly amendment?
I'm fine.
Okay, Anna.
She's fine.
Is she?
Well, she threw a thumb up. Did you see?
Sorry, I was on mute. I gave you the thumbs up. Yes, I approve of this.
All right. Any other discussion here? We're about a minute over time. The staff is on the edge of their seat. I don't see anybody raising hands. I want to take a vote on this. Miss Ann Deaton was our roll caller here early on, and I'm gonna ask her to do it again.
Okay, here I go. Lauren Birch,
I really wish I knew more about this before voting.
you can also, you can approve, disapprove, or you can abstain.
I'm gonna abstain just right now.
Okay. And Doug Cross,
Approve.
and thank you. Mary Sue Hammond.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. Jim Harden.
I approve.
All right, thank you. Mike Marshall.
Okay.
Approve.
Yeah, sorry, wasn't looking. Where's Ted Wilkes.
Approve.
Okay, and I skipped Brian Shepherd, who's there now. Brian?
Yeah, I approve.
Okay, thank you. Anna Shellham
Approve.
and Mike Blanton.
Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous with one abstention.
Okay, I think that concludes all our formal business. Not mistaken, do we have any public comment, Laura?
We do.
We do.
Yeah, Mike, we have one.
We have one commenter. Okay, please have them go now.
Mr. Mateo, you're live.
Actually, I didn't have anything planned, but there is a simple solution to your problem that you guys are just discussing. We use aqua mesh in our oyster cages that doesn't give like that mesh in the crab pot. And oftentimes crab pots use that same or a different type of mesh for the bait well. And so you might look into potentially using a more rigid mesh for the excluder.
Okay. Does that conclude your comment?
It does. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thanks for the comments. We'll take that definitely under consideration. And the last thing will be for tonight, we're gonna plan our agenda or talk about our next meeting. I believe that would probably be Laura.
Could I add one thing before that?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Hammond, please.
Is there a way for us to also, I don't know that it needs a motion, but I think we were pretty favorably impressed with that study, and we'd like to really encourage fisheries to continue to support or find support for similar research, and to congratulate UNCW on the work that they've done to inform us. I don't know if that's an appropriate role for us or not.
Just to let you know, the Commercial Fishing Resource Fund funded a good amount or all of this research. And we do, I sit on that committee as well as others, two others on here, and I'm not going to speak for them, but we've been a part of giving this grant money to them to allow this research. So we, I can say right now that this committee, the Commercial Fishing Resource Fund, has done its due diligence and will continue to do its due diligence to do projects such as these to minimize any impacts to bycatch that we can in commercial fisheries. And we're fully behind it, and the members that are there, I can't speak directly for them.
He's right.
I feel like,
Okay.
we're all on the same page.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
So, Laura, you want to talk about the next meeting?
Yep. So at your next meeting, it's again is going to be an update from the February meeting. And I'll be able to update you on the outcome of the revision as well, that you just discussed. And the only item that I have a question about is that your next meeting will be in person in April. And we have tentatively planned for the northern and southern meetings to be sort of out of town in the northern and the southern districts. But for these standing committees, it's sort of a preference. So we can hold them here in Morehead City, or if the committee would prefer a different location, you know, this is a good time to request that. For example, Mike, I know you're up in near Elizabeth City, so that's a haul for you. So you know, we have different options. There's Little Washington that we can meet in. There's we can meet here. We also have an in-person meeting in October. And at that meeting, you will be, we are expecting you to have an action item on, I believe, striped mullet. So it's also, you know, if you want to consider where you're going to hold these in-person meetings, that would be a good topic. And I do want to say, even if we have an in-person meeting, all of the advisory committee members always have the option to participate virtually. So if you can't make it, if it's too far of a drive, you always have the option to participate virtually.
Mr. Chairman, I would just ask, what's the most centralized location between all the members? Make it the easiest.
I think we talked about that a little bit, and we're to be determined. I think, you know, as me and Anna share the chair, you know, if she's going to chair the meeting, it should probably be in the South. If I'm going to chair it, I hope it would be considered that I could chair it up in, you know, toward Little Washington. It's not unheard of to have meetings in Little Washington.
I'm down either way.
We used to have them there all the time. Before COVID, I've been sat in Little Washington a many an AC meeting. But
yep.
I'm happy
anyway,
to travel, however it works.
You know, but if people are willing to go, I'm willing to go. So wherever I got to go to a meeting, that's where I'll end up at. But
Laura, do you have anything down around Sneed's Ferry?
Do I? I'm sorry.
Do we have a venue anywhere around Jacksonville?
I don't have one off the top of my head, but we could look for one.
Well, what I'm just suggesting, when Anna chairs it, maybe Jacksonville, and when Mike chairs it, maybe Washington. That kind of cuts down some of it both ways, or just do it in New Bern. If you want to do it in the middle, it don't make no difference.
Yeah.
We can discuss that in an email for sure.
That's fine.
Yeah, we can. And I can follow up with the group. We also have the other standing committees. So what we might do is just work on coordinating. So if some are going to meet in Washington, maybe all can meet in Washington, or maybe we want to spread those out. But that's certainly something we can talk about later. I just wanted to get feedback.
I have no problem traveling to going to Little Washington from Mike.
Awesome. And other than that, I don't have anything else unless the group has something that they are interested in seeing on the next agenda.
anybody in the group have anything they would like considered for the next agenda items that we're going to take up at the next meeting?
And of course, if anything comes up after we end tonight, just email Paula and I, and we can, you know, continue the discussion.
I will say that there was some discussion prior to the meeting with staff about some items that we possibly could talk about ahead, sort of looking very far forward of some things we're possibly going to be able to have to talk about. And that's trying to get familiar with the Blue Crab plan, and maybe a formal overview of the plan and the adaptive management strategies it contains, because we could possibly be looking at those strategies once again here after the Blue Crab stock assessment update. And so one of the ideas that we had was to sort of front load some of that work so that when it became necessary to talk about it, we would have a better and general idea of what was coming towards us to have a discussion about. So potentially at the next meeting, hopefully staff will put together a short presentation of some of this stuff, to not get into so much depth, but to get your brains working towards what that amendment, that blue crab amendment contains. Laura had a great presentation earlier, and it showed this running sheet that I'm assuming she created it, because she it was been a year or two now that's been around. It actually helped me a lot as the timeline of how these FMPs are falling, and what work is getting done on them at what points in time. And so that's a great resource to reference. I encourage you to kind of dig into these resources that they're pushing out to you, and just familiarize yourself as much as you can. But I think the next meeting being in person will be a lot better, especially on discussion. But anyway, we're running over our time, and if nothing else, I'll shut up.
Hey, Mike, this is Ann. I was just going to quickly say that some of the other items you asked for was, well, you mentioned information on that research that was done by the NC State student on a different methodology for assessing oyster populations. So that, but I think we discussed maybe clumping blue crab related info materials with, and then oysters on a different meeting day.
Yes, ma'am.
So just so everybody knows, yeah.
There's a list of items that we discussed, and
yeah,
I'll get back with staff. The chairs will get back with staff on organizing those agenda items towards the correct meetings. I wanted the committee to know that there had been quite a few items addressed, and we're trying to find the appropriate times to begin addressing them. And so most committee meetings are just kind of really straightforward, but if I get to be the chair, I'm gonna try to get as much in there for y'all as I can.
Thank you.
And so, because I've noticed in the past, quite a few committee members just really sort of show up and don't really have any idea of what we're going to talk about, and then it kind of gets set in their lap, and then they're forced to make a decision about something, and we could have helped them out a lot more ahead of that decision. So just bear with us. We're gonna get some items in front of you, and we're definitely looking forward to your input on those things, and discussing this stuff as it presents itself. So with that being said, Laura, are you good? You got all your stuff covered? I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn, or we don't even need one. I'll just adjourn the motion, or adjourn the meeting, excuse me.
Second that.
All right. So meeting adjourned. We'll see you in April.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all so much.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna stay on. I'm not gonna leave.
I ain't gonna leave. I'm gonna wait, because I'm waiting for all my people to leave. Then I'm gonna leave.
Y'all look crazy.
Karen,